He didn't say it to me, he said it to another. When I say action, tense up, goddammit. Can you imagine a guy coming in here, your boss, saying tense up when you do this? That's the worst thing you can say to an actor.
Robert Duvall has finally broken his silence, and Hollywood is going wild over it. After more than 60 years in the spotlight, the 94-year-old screen legend just dropped a confession that no one saw coming. He admitted there were 4 people in the industry he absolutely couldn't stand working with. Can you believe that? The man known for his calm attitude and sharp professionalism just cracked open a part of his past he kept locked away for decades. For years, Robert Duvall stood as the definition of Hollywood class: discipline, respect, and unmatched acting skill. His co-stars admired him, audiences adored him, and his quiet attitude about the chaos behind the scenes only added to his mysterious charm. But now, everything's changing. In a new, jaw-dropping interview that's got the whole industry buzzing, Duvall finally decided it's time to spill the truth, and it's hitting harder than anyone expected. He reportedly said, "I've kept my mouth shut for decades, but at this age, what am I waiting for? It's time to tell the truth." That single statement sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Nobody could believe it. Robert Duvall, the man everyone saw as Hollywood's ultimate gentleman, finally speaking out after all these years. For him to open up after half a century means those feuds must have cut deep. Sources close to him revealed that these weren't just little on-set disagreements. These were real clashes that changed the course of movie history. Entire productions were shifted, performances reworked, and the legacy of some legendary films was rewritten because of those behind-the-scenes battles. It's wild to even imagine. No one expected Duvall to open this vault of old Hollywood secrets, but now that he has, fans can't stop speculating about who those 4 names could be. The industry is practically holding its breath, waiting for the truth to drop. Who were the stars behind those perfect smiles hiding so much tension? And what really went down on those iconic sets? Before those names are revealed, we need to understand what finally pushed one of Hollywood's most private and disciplined icons to break his silence after all these years. This wasn't some emotional meltdown or heat-of-the-moment rant. It came from deep reflection at this stage in Robert Duvall's life. He reportedly felt it was time to finally set the record straight and expose the stories that had been twisted for far too long. An old friend of his, who chose to stay anonymous, shared that Duvall had grown exhausted watching documentaries and tribute specials turn real tension into fake tales of friendship. It bothered him deeply to see history rewritten into glossy fairy tales when he remembered how ugly some of those moments really were. The breaking point came during a recent Hollywood tribute celebrating his legendary career. Sitting quietly in the crowd, Duvall watched as a montage of film highlights played on the big screen. Full of smiling co-stars he secretly couldn't stand working with. The audience cheered, the narration praised their unshakable respect and lifelong friendship, and the crowd erupted in applause. But behind Duvall's calm expression, he was fuming inside. Later, in his interview, Duvall didn't hold back. He said, "I sat there listening to all that revisionist nonsense about creative partnerships while remembering how one of those people used to deliberately step on my lines to ruin takes." That single memory hit him hard. The truth had been buried under decades of Hollywood polish, and he was done letting it stay that way. He even revealed, "And another one tried to get me fired from what became one of my signature roles." At 94, with an Academy Award, countless nominations, and a career built on pure grit, Robert Duvall had nothing left to lose, and no reason to protect Hollywood's fake fairy tales anymore. This wasn't about clout or attention, it was about honesty. He made it clear that he wanted to tell the truth once and for all. More than that, Duvall said he felt a responsibility to younger actors entering the industry. "These young actors deserve to know the truth," he declared with conviction. He wanted them to understand that not every legendary movie was born out of love and teamwork. Sometimes greatness came from chaos, jealousy, and hard lessons learned on set. Behind the camera, it wasn't always as pretty as it looked. Then came the moment that shook everyone. The first bombshell name, Dustin Hoffman, the man Duvall called the credit thief. The revelation left fans stunned, especially because of how closely their careers once seemed linked.
Okay.
Dustin Hoffman, we lived uptown with Maurice Stern, who was a cantor, and my brothers, both my brothers were singers. So we had a place uptown with Dustin Hoffman. What a character.
Both men had started from nothing, 2 struggling actors chasing dreams in New York City before they became household names. "Dustin and I were struggling actors together in New York," Duvall recalled. "We were friends, or at least I thought we were. but friendship meant something very different to him than it did to me. Their story dated back to the early 1960s when they shared a tiny apartment in New York, barely scraping by while hustling for stage roles. At first, they shared everything: ideas, dreams, and ambition, a real brotherhood built on survival. But that bond didn't last. According to Duvall, Hoffman had a habit of taking his creative ideas during rehearsals and passing them off as his own. It was a betrayal that Duvall never forgot, and that wound, buried under years of silence, had finally resurfaced with a vengeance. "I'd worked for weeks on a specific interpretation for an audition," Duvall explained passionately. "I practiced it right there in our apartment. Every line, every gesture. And then suddenly, Dustin shows up to read for the same role using my exact approach, sometimes word for word." That betrayal cut deep. Duvall said he never forgot that moment, and it completely changed how he viewed friendship in Hollywood forever. When Hoffman landed those roles, Duvall said he'd tell people, "I inspired him." Duvall fired back sharply. "That's just a fancy word for theft." His tone wasn't angry. It was calm but razor sharp, carrying decades of frustration beneath the surface. He made it clear that this wasn't some one-time misunderstanding or friendly competition gone wrong. It became a full-blown pattern that followed them both as they rose to fame. Even after they made it big, Duvall said Hoffman kept leaning on him for creative advice while quietly taking all the credit. According to Duvall, one major example happened during the making of True Grit in 1969, where Duvall played the outlaw Ned Pepper. At the same time, Hoffman was filming Midnight Cowboy, one of his career-defining roles. Duvall revealed that Hoffman would often call him late at night, desperate for help shaping his character's voice and personality. "I spent hours on those calls helping him find Ratso Rizzo's voice," Duvall recounted. "I walked him through different tones, how to make it sound raw and real." But when Duvall later read an interview about Hoffman's process, he was floored. Hoffman had claimed he developed the character by studying people on the streets of New York, and never once mentioned those long late-night talks. That hit Duvall hard. "That one stung," he admitted. "That's when things truly fell apart." A few years later, the tension reached its breaking point when both men were up for the same role, the lead in The French Connection, 1971. The part eventually went to Gene Hackman, but for Duvall, that was the final straw. He realized Hoffman's pattern of taking and never giving back wasn't going to stop. "That's when I stopped taking his calls," Duvall revealed firmly. "I realized some people never stopped taking from others." That was the moment he drew the line, not just with Hoffman, but with anyone who tried to climb higher by stepping on someone else's talent. It was a wake-up call that left a lasting scar, one that shaped the rest of his journey through Hollywood's glittering but ruthless world. "They just get better at pretending it's teamwork," Duvall said sharply. Sources close to the production backed up parts of his story, claiming Hoffman didn't just borrow creative ideas, he went even further during the French Connection auditions. According to them, Hoffman allegedly told director William Friedkin that Duvall was difficult and uncooperative, even bringing up old theater days as so-called proof. Duvall believed that single conversation cost him a career-defining role, and that, to him, crossed the line completely. "That wasn't competition," he said firmly. "That was sabotage." Years later, Duvall confronted Hoffman about those rumors, but of course, Hoffman denied everything. "He denied it," Duvall recalled, "but I heard it directly from Friedkin himself." Even with that bitterness still buried deep inside, Duvall chose to stay professional for decades. He kept things cool in public, smiling for photos, joining panels, and even offering kind words about Hoffman's performances when asked. That calm mask of professionalism fooled everyone, but now it's clear that behind the polite smiles and handshakes, there was a rivalry quietly simmering for over 50 years. To the outside world, they were two Hollywood greats with mutual respect. But behind the curtain, it was a cold war of pride, betrayal, and silence. That's why when Duvall finally opened up, it hit the industry like thunder. Nobody ever suspected the quiet tension that had been brewing since their early days. And just when everyone thought the Hoffman story was the biggest bombshell, Duvall dropped an even bigger one. This time, he named a man whose reputation had seemed untouchable, Marlon Brando.
He's at 65 now. He's got 8th-degree black belt in judo. So, you know, I could go to him because I want to.
Duvall didn't hesitate when he said it. "Marlon Brando, the most destructive ego I ever encountered," he declared. His words stunned the room. He explained that in Hollywood, brilliance and chaos often share the same stage. Great performances don't always come from great relationships. Sometimes they happen in spite of terrible ones, Duvall said bluntly. With that signature honesty, he ripped away the illusion Hollywood works so hard to protect, the myth that talent and kindness always go hand in hand. When Duvall finally spoke Brando's name aloud, even the toughest Hollywood insiders froze in disbelief. Marlon Brando, the most destructive ego I ever encountered, he repeated without hesitation. That one line shattered one of Hollywood's biggest myths and left the entire industry speechless. The revelation didn't shock people because Brando was forgotten. It shocked them because he was Marlon Brando, the man many still call the greatest actor who ever lived. Robert Duvall didn't try to deny Marlon Brando's talent. He openly praised it. He was a genius, no question, Duvall admitted. But he was also the most destructive ego I ever encountered in this business. That one line left everyone stunned into silence. According to Duvall, Brando's brilliance came with a heavy cost. He was the kind of man who would shake up entire productions just to prove he could. Their biggest clash happened during the chaotic filming of The Chase in 1966, a movie that's mostly forgotten today, but its cast was pure Hollywood royalty. Marlon Brando, Robert Duvall, Jane Fonda, and Robert Redford. On screen, the film looked powerful and polished. But behind the camera, it was full-blown psychological warfare. Duvall revealed that Brando would deliberately change his performance from take to take, making it nearly impossible for editors to stitch the scenes together. If Brando didn't like the director's direction, he'd throw off everyone's rhythm on purpose, just to prove his control. He called it protecting the integrity of the performance, but Duvall saw it differently. "I called it professional sabotage," he said flatly. The tension between the two men built day after day until it finally exploded during one crucial monologue, one of Duvall's most important moments in the entire film. Multiple crew members from the production have since confirmed his story, backing up every detail. What was supposed to be a defining scene turned into an all-out showdown between two powerhouse actors, and it forever changed how Duvall viewed acting, respect, and professionalism. During one of the most intense moments on set, Brando started quietly disrupting Duvall's big scene, not by yelling or interrupting, but by making tiny, sneaky noises just out of frame. They were so subtle, only the microphones picked them up, forcing the crew to redo take after take. After the fifth ruined take, I confronted him, Duvall recalled. What happened next became a major turning point, not just in his relationship with Brando, but in how he saw the darker side of Hollywood hiding behind its golden mask. Duvall described it as their first real clash. When he finally called Brando out, the superstar didn't argue. He just smirked. He looked at me and said, "Maybe you should be stronger in your choices," Duvall recounted. Then he paused and added, "That was Marlon. He'd sabotage you, then make it look like your fault." That quiet, cutting cruelty revealed just how manipulative the business could be. What makes Duvall's confession even more shocking is how it completely flips the long-believed story of their so-called friendship. For decades, Duvall publicly praised Brando, calling him an influence and celebrating his artistry. Fans assumed the two shared mutual admiration, but behind the scenes, Duvall carried a bitterness that never truly faded. Years later, both men would appear in the Godfather universe, but interestingly, they never shared a single scene. For a long time, people thought that was just coincidence. But now, it looks like that detail might have been the quiet proof of a wound that never really healed. In light of Duvall's shocking revelation, it suddenly feels like keeping him and Brando apart in The Godfather was no coincidence. It was a carefully planned move, a quiet way to keep two Hollywood titans from clashing again. "I learned more from watching Marlon than from anyone else," Duvall admitted. "But what I learned wasn't just about acting. I learned how not to treat people." Brando's brilliance was undeniable, but his arrogance cast a long, cold shadow over everyone around him. That strange mix of deep respect and deep resentment explains why Duvall stayed silent for so many years. He admired Brando's genius, but couldn't ignore the cruelty that came with it. And if that revelation shook Hollywood to its core, his next confession left the entire industry blindsided. The third name on Duvall's list stunned insiders even more: James Caan.
Jimmy is he and Bill Murray are the two funniest guys I ever worked with. And Jimmy would tell a joke. It would take Brando 3 seconds to catch on. And he would go, like that.
The surprise was enormous because the two men had always been seen as brothers, both on and off the screen. Duvall didn't hold back this time either, describing Caan as competitive to the point of malice. That statement hit especially hard coming from a man famous for his calm, grounded nature. For fans of The Godfather, this one hurt. Caan's fiery portrayal of Sonny Corleone and Duvall's cool, calculating performance as Tom Hagen balanced each other perfectly. Together, they created what many critics still call one of the most believable brotherly dynamics ever captured on film. "Jimmy and I created one of the most realistic brother bonds in movie history," Duvall said. "And we did it while barely speaking to each other off camera. That's what I call real acting." According to Duvall, the tension between them started early, during the Godfather rehearsals. Both actors were hungry to stand out in that powerhouse cast, but their methods couldn't have been more different. Duvall was quiet and methodical, focused on every emotional beat, while Caan was fiery, unpredictable, and driven by raw instinct. But Duvall claimed that Caan's energy eventually crossed the line from ambition into aggression. "Jimmy was competitive to the point of malice," Duvall recalled. "He'd deliberately try to upstage everyone, especially me. If I had an important line, he'd start fidgeting with props or pulling faces, anything to steal focus. It was a clash of control versus chaos, and though audiences never noticed, that hidden rivalry helped fuel the raw electricity that made The Godfather unforgettable." The rivalry reportedly reached its boiling point during the now iconic family meeting scene, the tense moment when the Corleone clan debates whether to go to war. But between takes, that tension wasn't just part of the performance anymore. It was real. The heat on set came not only from the drama in the script, but from two powerhouse actors silently battling for dominance in every frame. During one rehearsal, Duvall was quietly discussing Tom Hagen's motivations with director Francis Ford Coppola when Caan suddenly cut in with a smirk. He tossed out a mocking comment about Duvall overthinking glorified secretary roles. And that was it. That single jab changed everything. "That was the moment I decided we would never be friends," Duvall said coldly. From that point forward, he made a choice, both as a man and as an actor. Duvall decided that Tom Hagen would always keep a cautious, watchful eye on Sonny Corleone in every scene, not just out of loyalty, but out of wary respect for his volatile nature. "It actually helped the performance," Duvall explained. "That's exactly what a Corleone would do with a hothead like Sonny." It's wild to think that one cutting comment turned into one of the most authentic on-screen dynamics in movie history. What makes this revelation even more shocking is how perfectly both men managed to hide that tension from the world. For decades, they showed up to press tours, anniversaries, and Godfather reunions, flashing perfect smiles and brotherly chemistry. To fans, they looked inseparable, laughing, reminiscing, and sharing inside jokes about one of the greatest films ever made. Nobody had a clue that behind those smiles was decades of quiet hostility. "When we were promoting the film, we both knew what was at stake," Duvall explained. "We weren't about to let personal issues ruin something that important, so we smiled, told the right stories, and played our parts." That statement hit hard, exposing just how much quiet professionalism went into maintaining Hollywood's favorite illusion. Even while carrying a grudge that lasted years, Duvall kept his composure. That restraint, the ability to stay cool while hiding real tension, says more about his character than any award ever could. It's proof that behind Hollywood's golden glow, even the greatest actors sometimes have to perform off-camera too. Duvall never needed to vent his frustrations in public. He poured them straight into his performances instead. That discipline, that unshakable respect for the craft, is exactly why these buried tensions stayed hidden for so many years. They were tucked beneath decades of red carpets, rehearsed smiles, and picture-perfect interviews. But while his clashes with Brando and Caan were born from professional tension, his final revelation hit far deeper. This one was personal. The fourth and most explosive name on his list? Robert Redford. The fraud behind the golden image. The moment Duvall said that, jaws dropped all over Hollywood. For decades, Redford had been untouchable, the industry's flawless icon of class, intellect, and moral integrity. To the world, he was the thoughtful artist, the environmental hero, the champion of independent cinema. His reputation was spotless, the kind of perfection Hollywood loves to worship. But according to Duvall, that image was nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion. Redford built the perfect public persona, Duvall said. The serious craftsman, the idealist, the man of principle. Then he dropped the hammer. But the reality I experienced was something else entirely. Behind that charming smile, Duvall claimed, was a cold and calculating opportunist, someone who saw crew members as background extras and fellow actors as rivals to outmaneuver. Their personal rift began during the filming of The Natural in 1984, where Duvall played sports writer Max Mercy opposite Redford's baseball legend Roy Hobbs. What should have been a smooth, professional partnership quickly turned sour once Duvall saw how Redford really treated people on set. He'd keep entire crews waiting for hours while he prepared, Duvall recalled. But it wasn't method acting. He was on the phone handling business deals while everyone else stood around on salary. That kind of arrogance didn't sit right with Duvall, a man raised on old-school respect and teamwork. He believed that every person on set mattered, no matter their title, and watching one star act like the world revolved around him struck a nerve that never healed. Day after day, Duvall watched as production schedules dragged on and tempers grew short, all because one man believed his time was worth more than everyone else's. To the cameras, Redford played the role of the noble hero. But behind the scenes, Duvall saw someone very different, and it shattered the illusion of Hollywood's golden boy forever. Duvall's tone hardened as he relived the memory, his voice sharp with decades of frustration. "That wasn't artistry," he said. "That was ego dressed up as dedication." Then, with a bitter laugh, he added, "That's not artistry, that's arrogance." You could almost feel the heat in his words as he described how the tension on set kept building until it poisoned the entire atmosphere. During The Natural, things got so intense that it started bleeding right into the scenes themselves. When Duvall and Redford finally faced off during their crucial confrontation moments, the hostility on camera wasn't acting. It was real. The camera caught every flicker of that simmering resentment, even though no one watching at the time realized just how personal it truly was. According to Duvall, the gap between Robert Redford's spotless public image and his behind-the-scenes behavior couldn't have been wider. Behind all that charm, Duvall claimed, was a man obsessed with control. During production, Redford allegedly pressured director Barry Levinson to cut down Duvall's screen time, especially scenes where Max Mercy's sharp questions threatened to expose cracks in Roy Hobbs' heroic image. It became clear he saw any strong presence opposite him as a threat, Duvall said. This wasn't about storytelling, it was about making sure he dominated every frame. The irony, Duvall pointed out, was almost too perfect to ignore. On screen, Redford played a man desperate to protect his public reputation from a relentless journalist. But off-screen, he was allegedly trying to silence that same journalist figure in real life. The hypocrisy of it all left Duvall furious. "What got to me wasn't just the behavior," he said. "It was the double standard, the speeches about artistic honesty, the talk about creative freedom, and then the way he really operated once the camera stopped rolling." Duvall described how Redford would go from giving inspiring talks at Sundance about the importance of artistic truth to walking onto a set and demanding final cut privileges and veto power over other actors. He'd preach about collaboration, Duvall said, then play the dirtiest games in the business to stay on top. For Duvall, that contradiction shattered whatever respect he had left. To him, Redford had mastered the art of the Hollywood illusion, the perfect public mask hiding ruthless ambition. The gap between Redford's saintly reputation and what Duvall claimed to have witnessed firsthand was shocking. But what came next was even more explosive. According to several crew members, the real breaking point came during post-production on The Natural. Duvall had finally had enough and decided to confront Redford face-to-face about his behind-the-scenes power moves. What Redford allegedly said in that private moment would become one of the most talked-about confrontations in Hollywood history. Duvall said he would never forget what came next. Redford looked him dead in the eye and said, "You're a character actor, Bob. I'm a movie star. We're not playing by the same rules." That one line hit Duvall like a punch to the gut, and it changed everything. That moment crystallized it all, he admitted. The fraud behind the golden image. From that day on, he said, "I never looked at him the same way again." That quote spread through Hollywood like wildfire. Coming from one Robert to another, it shook the entire industry to its core. But Duvall's words weren't just an attack on a single man. They were a strike at the illusion that's defined Hollywood for generations. The myth of the good guys, those charming, graceful, humble stars that the world idolized, suddenly didn't seem so perfect anymore. Duvall's final revelation didn't just pull famous names into the spotlight, it cracked open the entire idea of what makes someone a true Hollywood icon. Those flawless reputations that once seemed untouchable now looked fragile, even fake. It was as if Duvall's raw honesty ripped away decades of careful image management, forcing everyone to ask the question no one in Hollywood ever wants to face: what's real and what's just performance? In the days following his explosive interview, reactions flooded in, waves of disbelief, denial, and even quiet agreement behind closed doors. Representatives for Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, the only two surviving actors Duvall had named, released carefully worded statements expressing surprise at his comments, while still calling him a legendary figure deserving of respect. But the damage was done. Hollywood found itself shaken, left staring into its own reflection, questioning how many more stories like Duvall's were buried beneath all that glitter and those practiced smiles. For an industry built on illusion, one man's truth had just pulled the mask clean off, and no one could unsee it. What's even more revealing than the official statements from publicists is the quiet wave of confirmations now surfacing from inside Hollywood itself. After Robert Duvall's bombshell interview, insiders began stepping forward, not for fame, but to back up key parts of his story. Multiple crew members from The Natural have reportedly shared accounts matching Duvall's description of Redford's on-set behavior, repeating the same patterns he spoke about. Even a former assistant director from The Godfather confirmed that the tension between Duvall and James Caan was very real and impossible to ignore. And then came something no one expected. Even Francis Ford Coppola weighed in, carefully but noticeably. Without naming names, he admitted that the chemistry you see on screen sometimes comes from very complicated personal dynamics behind the camera. That one sentence said everything without saying too much, quietly hinting that Duvall's words weren't just bitterness, they were truth. Sources close to Duvall also revealed that several respected actors have privately reached out to him since the interview aired. Many thanked him for finally voicing what so many in the industry have lived through, but never felt safe enough to say out loud. His courage seems to have cracked open a door Hollywood has kept locked for decades. As for Duvall himself, he's calm, not angry, not regretful, just relieved. In a short follow-up statement, he made his intentions clear. This was never about revenge or tearing people down. "I've given 60 years to this industry," he wrote, "and I've always treated it with respect. Part of that respect means being honest about its realities, both the good and the bad." He explained that what he described wasn't petty drama or ego clashes. These were long-term behaviors that shaped productions and impacted careers. For Duvall, telling the truth wasn't about stirring scandal. It was about finally making sure the real story, the one hidden behind the fame and the polish, becomes part of Hollywood's history, not just the glossy version we've all been told to believe. As Hollywood scrambles to process the shockwaves from Duvall's revelations, one question still hangs in the air. Is he done talking, or could there be even more names waiting to be revealed? His closing words during the interview sent whispers racing through the industry. "Those four stood out," he said, "but they weren't alone." That single line lit up Hollywood like a spark in dry grass. Everyone's asking, who else could he be talking about? For decades, Hollywood has been a master illusionist, building myths, masking reality behind flawless smiles and golden trophies. But maybe, just maybe, the curtain is finally starting to fall. And as the truth shines through those cracks in the spotlight, one thing is certain: the world will never look at Hollywood the same way again. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Robert Duvall's untold truths, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment below. Tell us, which revelation shocked you the most?